Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Vibhuti Jha. As I have always mentioned to you, we always like to evaluate issues and events around us and assess their impact and implication on societies, politics, economics of events around us. Today, we are going to specifically focus on one key issue that has happened in India, and that issue is relating to the nullification of Article 370 and enactment of CAA in India, something for which, Indians everywhere have celebrated the integration of Kashmir, Ladakh, and Jammu with India mainstream, and the consequent issues arising out of that, women's equality, rights of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and all those things that were unknown hitherto. So we have done that. And the enactment of CAA has been done to protect the minorities in three neighboring countries of India where they are subjugated to immense hardship and humiliation. So there is an accelerated way to provide them citizenship of India if they migrate to us. So the question here is that the West in America and other places, driven by some of the Indians who are anti-Modi, anti-India, and propagate a human rights as a major issue, have made it embarrassing. True to our Indian form, we are very alert, very conscious, but we're not very aware of the background in which certain things get done. So to dive into this entire issue, I have great pleasure in welcoming Mr. Sanjay Dixit, who is the founder of Jaipur Dialogues in India, which is a remarkably successful platform where the education is happening, reframing of history is happening in a remarkably powerful way. And for the purpose of full disclosure, Sanjay ji and myself, we do a weekly show 10 p.m. in specific reference to United States and India relationship and politics of the entire region in that, and how it impacts both of us. So diving into that situation, Sanjay ji has written a brilliant book, and I read it on Kindle. I've got it on Kindle. I read every page of it, Sanjay ji. It is a remarkable book, and it is a remarkable book for one good reason. It's a story of writing the Indian history in a remarkable, honest, truthful way, which every Indian must know. So at the expense of sounding boring or pedantic, I would say every NRI in the world around us needs to read this book. And I'm not saying as a book promo. I'm saying this because I read the book. I generally consider myself to be well read, well aware of political happenings around us. But there were revelations in the book that I didn't know. So if who is generally well aware of things around us, found things that were very, very remarkable in its own way, then I'm 100% sure that majority of us, and especially the second generation Indians in America and elsewhere, who have unfortunately ended up being called from an erstwhile pejorative word called American born confused Desi ABCDs to new Hindus in name only. This book is essential for people to reclaim their roots. And to that end, I'm very delighted to have you, Sanjay ji. Welcome to Frankly Speaking.
Thank you very much, Vibhuti ji. Namaste and good morning.
Good morning.
To all your viewers.
Right.
And I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you.
Absolutely delighted to be with you.
So I wanted to open up the book, and we have, clearly an hour's time of, about 50 minutes or 55 minutes of time. So I wanted you to emphasize on understanding the Muslim mindset. In the first half of the book, you have spent phenomenal amount of time in trying to understand the Muslim mindset. Why do they do what they do and how it impacts? This is not a condemnation of a faith or a group of people, but what I always call understanding the nature of the beast. Who am I actually dealing with? If I'm dealing with a pride of elephants, then I know that they will not eat me up. But if I'm dealing with a single tiger, I know I have a chances of being eaten up. So, the question is, who exactly am I dealing with? So share with that, and then we will dive into the modern context of the entire problem.
Okay, you're quite right. This is explained beautifully by a Sanskrit term. It is called Purva Paksha. That Purva Paksha, basically, it is a Sanskrit non-translatable, I would say. Well, what it basically means is that, as you described, that you have to know the nature of the problem that you're dealing with. So you do a prior research kind of a thing. And this used to be a very important way of doing debates, because the ancient India is known for its debate culture. And that debate culture, they had laid down very clear rules of how debates were to be conducted. Because fighting was not the way. All the fights that used to take place in ancient India, they used to take place in debating rooms. They did not used to fight on principles, on doctrines, and they never used to impose doctrines. In fact, between Buddhism and Sanatana Dharma, what we call Hinduism popularly these days, these debates went on for nearly a millennium without a single drop of blood being shed. And that happened because the rules of debate were set. And they used to be called Vishaya, Vismaya, Purva Paksha, Siddhanta, and Sangati. Sangati is reconciliation. The object of the debate was reconciliation. So Vishaya is subject, Vismaya is the doubts around on both the sides. Purva Paksha is knowing the other person's position. Then Siddhant, that is the description of your doctrine, your establishing your doctrine. And finally, the last one was reconciliation. This used to be the format of all the debates for almost right till the turn of the last millennium. That is, till the Islamic invader came knocking. Till that time, this used to be the general behavior all over the discerning, I should say, academia.
Mhm.
This used to be the academic way. So when I started writing this book, and then because I've also written two earlier book on Krishna, and looking at Krishna as some kind of a great being who understood the ways of his world and the ways of his times better than most people, and who always found the best solution in a given situation. So, looking at it from that point of view, then I thought that I must first establish the Purva Paksha of the people that I am going to deal with. And ultimately, who were the people who were disputing Article 370 nullification and the Citizenship Amendment Act? These were Muslims. So one had to understand the mindset, and that is how that I went into the mindset, and then I got their mindset not from my own positions. All I did was to look into their own books and the principles that have been laid down by their own people. As in Islam, especially the Hanafi Islam that we follow in the subcontinent, Islam also that there is Sunni and Shia Islam, and within the Sunni Islam, Sunni and Shia Islam is actually a battle of dynastic succession. This is a dispute of succession. The people do not understand that it is the longest lasting dispute of succession in the world. 1400 years it has been going on. That
Right.
dispute of succession as to who is the rightful successor to Prophet Muhammad is the dispute. So that's Shia and Sunni, but Sunni being the overwhelming majority, I have confined it to Sunnis mostly. And they are divided into four schools of jurisprudence. These are called Hanbali, which is prevalent in Saudi Arabia and most of Arabia. Then there is the Shafi'i, Maliki, uh, which are either in Africa or in the Southeast Asia. And then there's the Hanafi, which is in Central Asia and the entire Indian subcontinent. That's where they follow the Hanafi doctrines. So in this Hanafi doctrine and Shafi'i and Maliki, these three doctrines, and all the Shia, the schools of jurisprudence, they follow what is called the principle of taqleed. Taqleed comes from, it's a uh, variation on aql. Aql means reason. Aql is an Arabic term which is also taken into Urdu in India. Aql means reason. Now, this principle of taqleed is very interesting. According to this principle of taqleed, which everyone follows, everyone is obliged to follow, otherwise, they go to hell. So, on the pain of heaven and hell, everybody is obliged to follow this. And that says that the aql is, or the reason, is the monopoly of the select few. And everyone else is bound to follow it, and that is by the doctrine. That is by the fiqh doctrine. That is that school of jurisprudence. Basic doctrine is taqleed. So that means that whatever the course is set by the alim or the ulama, that is that scholars, that the rest of the population is bound to follow on the pain of the rewards in afterlife. After all, all the prophetic religions or the Abrahamic religions are all about afterlife. They are not much concerned about this life, and they are more concerned about the afterlife. And whereas particularly Islam is absolutely obsessed with afterlife. So that being the case, you have to understand where they're coming from the point of view of what their alim and ulama are prescribing. So that's what I did. I dive deep into their philosophies. I dive deep into their doctrines. I looked at all the narrative building that was being done. I also looked at the pusillanimous way in which it was tackled by the Indian national leadership, which ultimately resulted in the tragedy of the partition, which incidentally the Indian National Congress agreed to partition, thinking that that would avoid bloodshed. And
Right.
my calculation is that if they had fought that idea of partition, there would have been probably much less bloodshed than it eventually occurred. And that happened only and only because they did not do Purva Paksha. They
That's
did
very
not do.
powerful. That's a very powerful reminder to all Indians and all Hindus specifically that while it is good to take things on face value, it's always good to understand the nature of the beast, my favorite phrase in that regard. There's another thing which comes to my mind, and I want to dive into that on the CAA part and 370 nullification. But prior to that, there is another very interesting dilemma that majority of us face, and I think it is purely due to lack of information or misappropriated information or just lack of awareness, is the understanding the Sufism part of it. That has bothered me a lot in the past because I call myself an educated, aware person. I knew that Sufis were only a pretensions of being nice, to put it in a sophisticated language like that. But deep down, they were also absolutely committed to Sharia. They were absolutely what you call, their narrative was also driven by the hardcore principles of Sharia. They were not free from Sharia. And as you rightly said, that in the world of ulemas and diktats, you are only supposed to follow. You choose a different path to follow. So, even Kashmiris, I'm surprised to know that they talk about, oh, hamare Kashmir mein to Sufism tha, hamare the mild variety ka tha Islam. Tell us something about, let the people know what is your finding on the, analysis of Sufism and its impact on Kashmir lifestyle.
Okay, this is actually describe this in the chapter 40 of my
Yes.
book. It's titled Sufism, Myth and Reality. Let me first examine the principles.
Right.
And the principles actually from around about 11th century onwards, in the time of Al-Ghazali, the foremost Sufi of all. From that time, it is well established, and there is absolutely no confusion on that part among the Muslims. The only confusion is among the non-Muslims. There is absolutely no confusion among them that
That's right.
Sufism, or as they call it, tasawwuf, that tasawwuf is subordinated to Sharia. that in case of any conflict between the two, Sharia shall prevail. There are these three principles that are called what is called Iman, Deen, and Ihsan. So Ihsan is number three, and Ihsan is what actually describes the Sufi way. The Sufi way is staying close to Allah. That is called Ihsan. Now, above that are Deen. Deen is the religion, and Iman. Iman is what you can call Tawheed, or the basic principle of oneness of God. That's the monotheistic principle. And all the people, especially Hindus, get confused between monotheism and certain principles of our Sanatan Dharma, because they fail to distinguish between monism and monotheism. You know, the first war between monism and monotheism is described in the Rig Veda. The 10 Kings War is actually a war between monism and monotheism, where Zoroastrians started propounding a monotheistic principle,
Right.
where they said that they have a one God, and they said, no, there is a higher universal consciousness principle. That universal consciousness principle, which is also termed as Brahma. And the Zoroastrians, they said, no, we have our great God called Ahur Mazda, and he is the one who is the creator and this and that. And that was the fundamental beginning of monotheism and the conflict between monism and monotheism. And this has been borrowed variously. The Abrahamic religions actually have borrowed a lot of these things from Zoroastrians. And then they have brought these Abrahamic principles of the God who is outside the cosmos and who sends a prophet, and all knowledge that you can gain is only through the prophet, unlike the Hinduism oblique Sanatana principle that all knowledge is within you and you have to simply discover it. That you go within yourself and discover the knowledge, and you discover your own divinity, and you discover your own oneness with the universal consciousness, and thereby you liberate yourself. That is the, I should say, that that is the higher and evolved principle of looking at the cosmic order. Whereas the Abrahamic principles are very shallow, very narrow, and very dogmatic, because there is no room for any debate in that. That is because, again, I have another booklet that is called All Religions Are Not the Same. And I have differentiated between the Abrahamic way or the prophetic way and the Dharmic way, or that is the ways of the uh, Indian spiritual systems like Sanatan, Buddhism, Sikhism, uh, Jainism, and even Zen and Tao Te. They are differentiated on 7 counts. 7 counts are: number one, time concepts. First of all, number one, uh, scientific attitude. Scientific attitude in the sense that you you do not follow any dogma. You question. You raise questions. You find out. You discover. You are free to perform all the basic four scientific experiments. That is what is called verification, repetition, uh, your mm, verifiability, repeatability, universality, and falsifiability. And in fact, today in the scientific world, falsifiability, especially after Karl Popper's principle, falsification, or the ability to uh, question and try and falsify a doctrine, is considered to be the most fundamental principle of science. Unless you have that, you cannot call anything as scientific. So wherever that falsification is denied, as it is done in Abrahamic religions, you cannot try and falsify Bible, you cannot try and falsify Quran, and you cannot try and falsify either Torah or even Talmud for that instance. So all these are unscientific ways of life. Sanatan and the dharmic ways are the only scientific ways of looking at life. Let that
I
be clear.
I totally agree with you, because I am, bring it to the contemporary world. When coronavirus hit the world around us, Joe Biden, the now president-elect of America, who is going to be sworn in on January 20th, he said, we are talking about science based on which we will take a decision. And my immediate question that popped up in my mind to ask Joe Biden, if ever I get a chance to ask, is, hey, Joe, what has science got to do with religion? Let's talk about that. So,
Okay. So I'll just give you one.
yes,
I
yes,
have
yes.
seven. So
Right.
let me complete the other six.
Sure, sure.
And the first differentiation is science. And the second is time concepts. That is the what is called this cyclic time or quasi-cyclical time versus the linear time of the Abrahamic religions. The third one is logics. All the Abrahamic religions follow the binary logic. This or that. I have the only truth. I have the sole truth. Whatever else is the others have is false. Whereas in dharmic principles, it doesn't go that way. It's three-way, four-way logic. Uh, it is always a shade of gray between white and black there. And most popular logic is what is called the four-way logic, the Chatushkoti logic. Anyway, we don't have time to go deep into that. Then, so you got three, you got science, we got time concept, we got logic concept. Then we've got the what is called the epistemology. Our epistemology is based on direct evidence. And the epistemology of all the Abrahamic religions is based on what is called dogma or the word. As you have in Bible, they say that, okay, then there was word and the word was with God and the word was God. So whatever there is in scripture, it's true. That's all. So that kind of scriptural evidence is not permitted. Even Vedas are allowed to be falsified. If you can do that, you're allowed. In fact, in Gita, it is said that if you have the direct experience, you don't even need the Vedas. This is 2.46 Bhagavad Gita. You can check.
Yeah.
Then, of course, then the cosmology. We have the infinite cosmology, which is borne out by science today. And the cosmology of the Abrahamic religions is very limited. You know, 7 heavens and 7 hells, and another benefactor, God sitting outside the cosmos. That's all. Then we have the eschatology, where the death is to seek liberation, and in Abrahamic religion, death is to seek eternal bondage of hell or heaven. And here it is eternal liberation, so fundamental difference. And finally, the immanence of divine. The divine is immanent according to us, according to Sanatan, according to all dharmic paths. And in the Abrahamic religions, if you say that the divine is within you, then you get killed. Okay, so we're talking about Sufis.
That's right.
To understand Sufis properly, I had to give this background. That there's a lot of confusion. The people say that, okay, the Sufis also believe in the immanence of divine. That is where the entire confusion comes. They do not realize that in the 11th century, that notion was completely disabused by Al-Ghazali, the foremost Sufi, and he said that no, that divine is not within, divine is outside. It is the Allah who is sitting there creating and destroying time every minute or every moment, whatever the smallest unit of time you can get. And so he made it completely deterministic.
Right.
And after that, of course, when Ibn Taymiyyah and others came, they completely forbade even the thought of thinking of God as within you. The
Right.
last one to do was the Spanish school, when they devised that doctrine, what is called, there are these two doctrines, Wahdatul Wajud, unity of existence. And the doctrine that is prevalent in Islam today is Wahdatul Shahud. That is the witness, okay, whatever I say is true.
Right.
Okay, so Wahdatul Wajud was rejected. Therefore, the immanence of divine is not available in Islam anymore. It was available till about 11th century by with the Mutazallis and the Tahqiqis, who were killed off completely.
That's right.
There's only one strain left, and after 11th century, we have the dark age of Islam, and the dark age is continuing. So we must get that clear. And with that, the Sufis are the Sufis, according to the precepts that were set by Al-Ghazali and supported by the conservative Ibn Taymiyyah, that is that they have to be subordinated to Sharia. So when we say Iman, Deen, and Ihsan, that is the hierarchy. Similarly, the uh, Tariqat, Sufis are divided into sects that are called Tariqa. And that was a Tariqa means way. So way, it is a different way to approach Allah in the sense that Ihsan means that you sit close to Allah. That is one of the concepts. But Tariqat is subordinated to Shariat. So once you get that clear, then you know that the Sufism is just an arm of the Shariat, and they have to follow the ulama in every sense. So the head of a Sufi silsila or tariqa is called a Sajjada Nashin. That Sajjada Nashin is for all theoretical and all practical purposes is subordinated to the ulama or the high scholar of that particular fiqh. Period. Therefore, if you go and look at the behavioral aspects, all the greatest massacres that took place in India were all undertaken by the Sufis. Aurangzeb himself was a Sufi. Then you look at the great massacres in the 20th century, all of them were spearheaded by Sufis, whether it was the Mopila massacre of 1921 in Kerala, whether it was the, what is called, that was headed by the Qadris. There are four main tariqas in India. And the fifth one, of course, is Kubravi, the Kashmir of which you made a mention. I'll come to that also. Then the Noah Khali massacres that people might have heard of, that was carried out by Chishtis. The great Calcutta killings, that was carried out by the Sohrawardi. He was, in fact, the premier of Bengal at that time. Then the Naqshbandis, which are the most influential among all the Sufi silsilas, these Deobandis are an offshoots of them. They have been active. In fact, Aurangzeb was a Naqshbandi, so you don't need any greater attestation. Aurangzeb himself was a Naqshbandi. Then you come to Kashmir. Kashmir was this guy called Shah Hamadan. He came to Kashmir in 14th century, and he prescribed a code of Shah Hamadan, which is actually there in my book. You can read those principles. According to those principles, it was a duty for the Muslim ruler, who actually Muslims were in a minority in 14th century at that time. It was obligatory on them to persecute the Hindus in every way and to convert them. And the code of Shah Hamadan, which is basically the code of Umar, Hazrat Umar, the second caliph, that has been followed by every Sufi. And that prescribes things like, you have to give a survival tax to live. You cannot wear the same clothes as the Muslim does. Any Muslim can go and be a guest at his wish in your house. You cannot refuse him. Then you have to accept humiliation as a part of the code. And there shall be no temples constructed. There shall be the duty of the ruler to eliminate kufr from the land. All those kinds of things are there. This is prescribed by Code of Shah Hamadan. That is the kind of some of the worst code, almost like an ISIS code, except that the ISIS did not give you the chance to pay jizya. They paid you the chance to pay jizya. That's all. But they reduced to the level of second level or third level human being. So all this talk about Sufis being different and Sufis being peaceful is hogwash. The Sufis are, in fact, as bad, or probably I would say worse because they carry a facade, which actually fools you.
Which is deceptive in nature, if you might say so.
Yes, absolutely.
It's another form of a sad practice of halal, that they lull you into believing one thing while their objective is something else. That's a very, very amazing revelation, I would put it that way. I mean, rewriting of history that you have done in chapter 40. And I read every word of it. And Sanjay ji, I would put it this way, that it's a modern interpretation and modern history of truth telling. We can do what was earlier known as Chanda Mama and Vetal ki kahaniyon mein kehte the, ki we can do a dharavahik of the book on any TV show, 2 chapters that on per hour or a chapter an hour. Let me dive into, you after understanding the mindset that everything is Sharia driven. Absolutely, that is what I call unfortunate word is everybody is slave of Sharia. There is no true freedom out there. Whereas our faith, Hinduism, is all about true freedom. Do what you want. There is no prescription, there is no mandate, there is no subjugation, and there is authentic free will. I will now get back to the entire scenario of Article 370, because in one of the chapters 39 that you say is that, Pakistan got completely neutralized. I mean, they were completely taken aback, given the background that Farooq Abdullah and Owaisi in India had almost threatened Modi कि 100 साल तक आप उसे नहीं हटा सकते 370, and in a very deft way of dealing with the whole situation constitutionally, legally, and politically. Modi ji showed the way how that particular thing had happened, and the integration of Kashmir, Ladakh. I'm very happy about one thing. Ladakh, which is the largest territory, land mass, where Nehru said not a blade of grass grows, is pivotal to India's northernmost territorial integrity. So Ladakh as well. And Kashmir is a tiny principality in the entire big region. How did the whole country, how the whole state got known as Kashmir? And as if Ladakh and Jammu were just bloody extensions of the whole area. So the point which I'm trying to make about is that in chapter 39, you talk about how did the entire nullification of 370 became a fatal blow to Pakistan's new Medina policy or Ghazwa-e-Hind. Tell us something more about it.
Yes, you got it right, actually, that we often talk about the constitutional, political, and legal points. And that's what we mostly talk about in India.
Right.
But we have to understand that it was a shock to Pakistan. And by Pakistan, I do not mean the territory. By Pakistan, I mean the idea, because I always said, and this is written in the book as well, that Pakistan is fundamentally an idea. It's a separatist, it is an exclusivist idea.
Right.
So why it shocked Pakistan more was because it struck at the very doctrine. It struck at their supremacist and their exclusivist doctrine. The book, incidentally, in India and I think even in the US, is listed under constitutional law. But I deal with all these aspects. I deal with politics, I deal with the history, I deal with the behavior, all these things. And most importantly, talking about the doctrine. Why it shocked Pakistan the most was because the Pakistan was founded on the idea that they were basically carrying out a replica of what Hazrat Muhammad did in Arabia in the 7th century. That he founded another kingdom when he could not have his way in his original place, that was Mecca. So he did hijrat, or he did self-exile, and he went to Medina, and then in Medina he founded his own new sort of kingdom, and then he consolidated himself, and once he had consolidated himself enough, then by all stratagems, by using deceit, by using power, and by confusing the enemy, he won Mecca back. And by winning Mecca back, then he destroyed infidelity, or he destroyed kufr from there, and he became what is called the ultimate idol breaker. destroyed all the idols from Kaaba and only let his Allah's idol remain there. Uh, Even that, of course, a lot of people dispute, but then there's a fact that there were 360 idols in Kaaba. That included Allah's idol as well. So it is inconceivable to me that he broke the Allah's idol also. But since nobody's seen the inside of Kaaba except the very few who would not bear witness to anything, so I will make an educated guess that that particular idol still exists. So this Barelvi sect, which supported Jinnah, they actually promoted this doctrine. It is called Qawmiyat Judagana. Qawmiyat Judagana means a separate nation. And they brought forth this doctrine, which was actually espoused by or translated into English by Jinnah by calling it two nation theory.
Mhm.
But the two nation theory is not just a separate nation, but it is also an equal nation. So that is why this Pakistan's quest for equality with India all the while, because they were supposed to be founded not on the basis of just a separate nation, but also on the basis of an equal nation. But the equality has proved a mirage, and in order to chase that mirage, they have kind of destroyed themselves. They have self-destruct. So that doctrine was actually honored by Pandit Nehru by giving Article 370 to Jammu and Kashmir and virtually giving a lifeline and virtually giving a support to that doctrine that, okay, that we have a separate status in Kashmir because it's a Muslim majority state. And even Hindus, okay, the coward Hindus, which is the narrative in Pakistan, that Hindus are cowards. The coward Hindus, they have honored us, and they have also accepted that this is separate. And we will win back Kashmir, and our march towards Mecca of Delhi, which is the seat of our original Mughal Empire, which we are supposed to inherit and which we should have been given. I've quoted some people, Khwaja Hassan Nizami, for instance, who said that, okay, the British are bound to give it back to us because he took it from the Mughals, which of course is a complete falsehood because British took it from the Marathas.
Right.
So that is the narrative that has been ruling the minds of Pakistanis, so much so that even their military's motto says uh, taqwa, iman, jihad fi sabilillah. And the jihad fi sabilillah is the violent form of jihad in Quran and in Hadith. So they kind of amalgamated that imagery with their existence. And that imagery got hit. That doctrine got hit. Suddenly they realize that there's something that has happened that is not going according to script. Because according to their history and according to the Sunnat of Hazrat Muhammad, the Mecca people were not supposed to have done that to Medina. So that was a big doctrinal shock. That was a shock of Islamic proportions, because that entire history that which they had crafted and on which they had fed their public, that ultimately they were going to win back the Mecca of India
Right.
and win Delhi back and rule over the entire subcontinent, that got hit by the nullification of Article 370. So that is the reason for that basic shock.
And that's what I have said many times, that Pakistan suddenly realized that the toy called Kashmir that was in their hands, that got snatched away. So if you see a child when a favorite toy is snatched away, the child looks bewildered and he cries. And that's the story of Pakistan, if you were to put it in a milder version in that sense. But it also brings back to other thought process in this. Kashmir was one, but you also refer to Nehru. Nehru, it was, I feel, on a grassroots level, he completely sold out Kashmir and Kashmiri Pandits, despite being one himself. The first generation Indians, the Congress people who are romanticized, they virtually romanticized that Nehru was the ultimate good thing that happened to India. In reality, I call Nehru, he actually lives the phrase, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. That's Nehru. Whether it was deliberate, mistakenly, or through his lofty ideals of, what you call utopian beliefs, I do not know. But he did impact. His Nehru imprint on the Indian polity is heavy. Even today, people talk about Nehruism. People want to bring about Nehruism in the demented form that Congress party is right now. So share with us, and I'm willing to take a whole session on Nehru, that how he actually, all his policies ended up hurting India most. Sometimes one wonders, what was he thinking? What was he drinking? What was his Kool-Aid? I do not know. So share some things about Nehru which are critical to understanding the Kashmir problem, because had Kashmir not been given a separate status and given to Nehru, had it remained under Sardar Patel and the Home Ministry, we would have none of this problem. And that's what is important to understand here.
For that, we have to understand that Nehru became the president of the Congress, who was slated to become the interim prime minister, not because of his own standing within his own party. He became the president because Mahatma Gandhi imposed him upon the Congress. He did not have a single vote in the Congress Working Committee in 1946 when the new president was to be elected. Maulana Azad was the president before him. Sardar Patel was almost nearly a unanimous choice. In fact, there were, I think, 15 votes, out of which 13 were in favor of Patel, and one was for Acharya Kripalani, and one was undecided. That was Maulana Azad, because he secretly harbored another term for himself, though he had been president for nearly 5 years till that time. And yesterday we were talking with Anuj Dhar, and now it appears, and also I've looked at a number of other historical documents, including Ram Manohar Lohiya's description of the events that happened around the partition, that Mahatma Gandhi imposed him on Congress in order to oblige the British. And the British wanted their man to be the interim prime minister, and Nehru was that man. So Nehru, basically, the transfer of power occurred not between the British and the Indians. It occurred between the British and a stooge of the British. So that's what happened on 15th August 1947. We call it the Independence Day, but even legally it is not Independence Day. It is called Independence Day only because it was brought about by what is called the Indian Independence Act 1947, which was passed by the British Parliament.
British Parliament, yes.
Okay, so we call it independence, but it was basically transfer of power. And whatever happened happened on the British terms. Whatever the British dictated, our good old Prime Minister Nehru did. And one of the things that he also did was to be very, very soft towards the new nation of Pakistan. Because at that time it was possible, if Patel had been the prime minister or any other strong-willed person, somebody had attacked India the way they did in Kashmir, then he would have pulverized Pakistan and finished them off. They were in no position to resist. But lo and behold, what happens? Mahatma Gandhi goes on a fast, give 55 crores, which is a very big sum, to Pakistan, which they used to conduct the war against India. So Nehru was also chosen by the British because they could play with him. They knew that he was a woolly-headed, naive personality, and they played with him all along. In fact, they played with him right till the end. You know that the Indian intelligence used to report to the British intelligence till 1968. So that is the situation. They became the part of the Commonwealth.
Right.
The Indian Independence Act 1947, the Government of India Act 1935 are till today not repealed by the British Parliament. You know this? I think that's
that's one of the things I I came to know from your book, reading the book, that, oh my God, it's not been repealed yet. So what happens if they try to invoke that?
It has been repealed by the Indian Constitution.
Right.
But damn it, how do you repeal something which you have not enacted? It has been enacted by the British Parliament, and the British Parliament hasn't repealed it.
Right.
So Nehru was a quintessential British representative planted or implanted in the new dominion of India and continued later on in the Republic of India. So that is the basic, I should say, the description of Pandit Nehru. And that being so, I think it will fit in when you look at most of his actions. Uh, that is one attribute of his. And the second one is that he was highly influenced by Soviet Union. Taken these two together, I think you can explain every single one of his actions.
Yeah. Is like the Mahalanobis model of economic growth, 5-year plan, public sector undertakings controlled by the government. So, it was everything that he did hurt the country hugely in terms of pure wastage. And that's why the modern India needs to understand and contest, actually, the myth and romance of Nehru. A narrative built around, and that brings me to another aspect that we have often talked about, that somewhere along the line, the Indians, the Hindus, have not created their own narrative. And through the process of Jaipur dialogues, we are bringing new narratives people were not aware of, even though it existed as a truth and a fact in the books of history. So, for example, CAA, for example, and I mean, India has been branded, Modi ji has been attacked. Every Indian looks bewildered here, and they have no answer for that. That how that CAA is nothing else but a revamping of the Modi Nehru Liaquat Pact, which happened at the time of partition. Now, as a student of liberal arts, economics, and history, I'm aware of some of it. But the point is that this was a revamping and reenactment of the same thing. Share that with the people, because that's important to understand.
But people forget that India was divided on the basis of religion.
Right.
And that too, how? Muslim and non-Muslim. It wasn't
Yes.
Hindu versus minorities. It was Muslim versus non-Muslim. And that just shows how the global powers and the global forces worked at that time.
Mhm.
That and they eliminated all minorities from their
Correct.
territory. We know that they were 23% in 1947. Now they are 3%. All minorities included, Hindus, Christians, whatever. Jews have disappeared. The only Hindus and Christians remain. Sikhs have also almost disappeared. So this Liaquat Nehru Pact was signed again in the naivety, in the best naivety of Pandit Nehru, because the demand at that time was that that's everybody had seen what had happened in West Pakistan, and then the same process was started in East Pakistan. So the demand in India was that one should ensure full population exchange, or at least allow all the Hindus from East Pakistan to come to India, and for that claim a certain territory in proportion to the number of Hindus that were there, and which that were almost 30%. And most of them were from the lowest strata, what we call Dalits today. The Namashudras and Rajabangshis, they were the highest number at that time. And this gentleman, in his naivety, he goes and signs a pact of protecting minorities from each other's territory with the very same people who had carried out the Holocaust in West Pakistan. So if you cannot understand the direct evidence, then I think only not even God can help you. That direct evidence was there before you, but still you went and signed this pact,
Mhm.
thinking that the leopard will change its spots. And it also contained, in fact, I've reproduced the entire Liaquat Nehru Pact. So,
Yeah.
what it actually means is that there is full freedom for minorities to travel to each other's territory. The minorities feel in Pakistan that they want to come to India, they can. What Pakistan did, this is very interesting, that under the garb of Liaquat Nehru Act, they stopped taking in Muslims from India. Now you can see the narrative. The whole narrative is that Pakistan is our exclusive property, we've achieved it. India is our joint property. And now, in order to carry out our operation Naya Medina, we have to keep that Muslim population intact while driving away the Hindu population or persecuting them or converting them. So it is that legal legacy that is flowed from the non-implementation of the Liaquat Nehru Pact that has been sought to be rectified by this much delayed Citizenship Amendment Act. In fact, if you follow the Liaquat Nehru Pact, which is still on the statute, by the way, okay, April 1950. If you follow that in its letter, forget the spirit. If you follow it to its letter, then you are obliged to give citizenship to any person from minority who comes from Pakistan to India. So I would say that the Citizenship Amendment Act, which has been brought in, that is still incomplete. I mean, you are still saying that, okay, you're given a cutoff date till 2014. Why? They are persecuting Hindus and Christians and Sikhs and everybody else, every non-Muslim, to their maximum capacity. I think horror stories coming every day. So we must follow the Liaquat Nehru Act in spirit. And in fact, I would say that let's liberalize it further and say that anybody who comes will be granted citizenship immediately after the security verification is completed. That has
Sanjay,
not been done. So
Sanjay ji,
we are
this has
still.
been a fabulous conversation. As the saying goes, that every good conversation is bound by time. Vad vivad, the tark debate has a time limit. We can't do the infinitum, but would definitely want to talk more about it as the time goes by. I think my appeal to the viewers would be today, and when it goes on YouTube tomorrow, is read the book. I'm not marketing or selling the book, but I'm asking you, I'm demanding of you, I'm appealing to your good sense to know the history of India the way it is, the way we are attacked in America. That's our obligation as an Indian, that we must know the truth to confront false propaganda against us. CAA is not a violation of human rights. Actually, it is a protection of human rights. If you do not understand the difference in that, then we are doomed. And that's what we will be conduits. So Sanjay ji, thank you very much for being here. It has been wonderful to have you. And I trust the viewers will also have benefited immensely from this conversation today. Have a great weekend. Have a great week ahead and see you next week again. Thank you.